I've been agonizing over if I should do a video about my experience as a Jewish YouTuber after October 7 and the year I've had. I have this kind of like on my chest. I feel like I have an urge to share what it's been like, to put out there a kind of a document, a record of what I have seen and experienced over the last year. And yet at the same time, my area of expertise, a lot of what I cover has nothing to do with the Middle East. And I don't want to step into something so huge, so controversial, so painful. I know there are people, including within the Jewish community, who are on different places on the spectrum of this issue, and I don't feel qualified to speak to it as an expert. I just wanted to share a personal experience aside that I have seen over the last year. And so I actually asked some people I consulted on, should I do a video about it? And I got very different advice. One person said, if I were you, I wouldn't go there. What are you looking for, trouble? And other people said, yes, put it out there and post and ghost or something. And I got the advice to make the video and then decide if I want to publish it. And I thought that is the right thing for me to do at this point, because I really have the urge to make this video. And so I am going to share some reflections here, and we'll see if this gets seen by anyone else. So 1 year ago today was the holiday Sukkot, the Jewish holiday Sukkot, probably my favorite holiday next to Hanukkah, competing with Hanukkah. And 2023 in October, end of September, early October, I was actually in Israel for the holiday Sukkot with my son, Seth. This was a very, very big deal for me because I have a very complicated backstory with regards to Israel. First of all, because I come from the anti-Zionist Hasidic community, and I'll explain to you what I was taught in just a minute, but I left that world with my son when he was 5. And subsequent to leaving, we went through a lot of struggles. I went through some really hard times financially, where we had really nothing, and the idea of travel was like impossible. And last year, I got the opportunity to travel for work to do a video of B'nai Brak for the holiday Sukkot. And I published that video on my YouTube channel, but you only saw one day of my trip, which I spent most of it in Yerushalayim, in Jerusalem, with Seth, including visiting Meisharim. It was a very, very, very special experience to be for Sukkot in Israel with Seth for the first time. We had a lot of talks about what it means to be Jewish, how we feel about Israel, walking the cobblestone streets of Yerushalayim, Old Jerusalem. Very beautiful, meeting friends. And I came back, it wasn't the end of the holiday, and as I was trying to catch my bearings, I started to get messages, are you okay, what's going on? And that's how I found out about the terrible pogroms of October 7 and the very, very devastating events and the year that followed. My feelings for Israel come from a very primal place. I don't think it's a sophisticated ideology as much as it is a deep emotional feeling for Israel. When I hear that tikva, for instance, I can't not cry. It's so beautiful. It makes me feel this gorgeous connection to so much suffering, to our past, to our fight to come out of so much suffering and to rebuild. And it is, Israel is a place of a different kind of Jewishness than I was raised in. Being in Israel for the holiday Sukkot, for instance, is the experience of being included, of diversity and inclusion, of many different experiences, many different Jewish experiences, many different kinds of Jews. And to me, it is gorgeous. It is just such a beautiful feeling. For instance, the holiday Sukkot, I have very, very special feelings for the holiday Sukkot. I've made some content about it. When I left the Hasidic community, I actually continued to build the hut that you use on Sukkot. But now that I live in Brooklyn, I have this tiny Brooklyn apartment, no balcony. It's impossible for me to have a sukkah. And so I usually give tours before Sukkot, and I get so swept up with the Sukkot energy in the Hasidic community, all the shops that spring up on the streets, and people come up to me and they say, "Isn't it like Jerusalem here?" And then I go home, and for the holiday Sukkot, I don't have a sukkah, and I feel a kind of like, well, this is the loss I suffer because I left the Hasidic community. Being in Israel was amazing because there were sukkahs everywhere. Everyone celebrates. You get Chag Sameach from everyone. I feel kind of swept up in a very gorgeous feeling of a country that's not perfect, but it feels like it's battling to allow for differences in such a beautiful way that to me feels like a miraculous and gorgeous story. And I feel deeply touched by it. I feel embraced by it. I feel I belong to it. And it's really interesting because of what I was taught in the Hasidic community about Israel. So I was raised in Kiryas Joel, right, where outside of New York City, where we were taught that Israel is the homeland for the Jews, but the Jews sinned some 2,000 years ago, and God said, as punishment, I will exile you from the temple, and I will destroy the temple and exile you from your homeland, and I will only reassemble you into your homeland when you have earned your redemption, and I will send the Messiah, and that will be the end of suffering. We learned that the Messiah has not yet come, and so the Jews have to wait for the end of that period of suffering. We also learned that Zionism, the movement that began in 1897, well before the Holocaust, was an affront to God. It was Jews saying, we're done waiting for the Messiah. We're just going to go and end this exile, the state of exile and wandering and anti-Semitism on our own, and we're going to form our land now. Every day as a Hasidic kid, I said, Ani Ma'amin b'min shleima b'vis Hamshiach afal pi shisma maya im kol zeh hakaloi b'chal yom shivai. Every day I said, I believe with my whole heart the Messiah will come, even though he's taking his time. He will come and he will take us back to our holy land. And then there will be the redemption, and then there will be the end of anti-Semitism and the end of suffering, and just people who lose family members prematurely in accidents, in tragedies, people who have all sorts of suffering. All of that will end, and we'll all be reunited, reincarnated, and it'll be a beautiful, happily ever after. But Zionists had not waited. They had decided to take the redemption before the time, and so they angered God. And the Satmar Rabbi, the head of the movement that I was raised in, Rabbi Joel Teitelbaum, who was the rabbi in Satmar in Hungary, now Romania, and who came here after the Holocaust, he believed and he argued that because the Jews did such a terrible thing by not waiting for the Messiah and embracing Zionism and a homeland before the time and the premature end of the exilic phase, therefore God walked back on his promise to offer some protection of the Jews in Israel, and therefore of the Jews in exile, and therefore the nations turned upon the Jews in the Holocaust. I've covered this in some of my videos, one with Rabbi Sostra Katz and one with the late Professor David Beale, may his memory be a blessing, who's wonderful and also talked about this and recently passed away. And we discussed the Satmar Rabbi's theology, which was essentially a Jewish theology to ask the question, what actions have brought this tragedy? And for the Satmar Rabbi, it was Zionism that brought the Holocaust. This meant that I was raised in New York, and when I was raised in New York, we had a very casual anti-Zionism was at the baked into the fabric of my childhood. For instance, this is, I believe, a schoolwork from my 7th grade, which is Who's Who Among Governments, is all the world's government. Bill Clinton was president of the United States at the time. It's Jean Chrétien is in Canada, Christian. Fernando Henrique Cardoso in Brazil. We have all the world governments. And when it came to the Middle East, there was an X on Israel and there was nothing for Israel. Likewise, in our Judaic studies, we had a special curriculum for Israeli Independence Day, which we called High Eid, and was observed as a tragedy. We had a special curriculum to commemorate Israeli Independence Day as a tragic day, in which we had questions, prompts we had to answer about what was bad about Zionism. And what you can see from my schoolwork is we learned that Zionism was essentially a loss of faith, a loss of piety. It was a very theological objection expressed here, where Zionists at the core were removing agency from God, removing a sense of, well, God leads all the world and makes all the actions, and were taking matters in their own hands and saying, well, if terrible things happen, we should maybe fight back. We should organize into an army. And this was a very secular view of self-determination instead of divine determination. And the secularity, the modernity inherent in Zionism is what we were opposed to. And it's actually, mind you, really ironic that this very fundamentalist view, which involves blaming the Holocaust on Zionism, is being embraced by people on the left as a kind of allegiance, which is really mind-boggling to me and is dishonest about what religious anti-Zionism really is about. Because religious anti-Zionism is, I think, at its very core, rejecting the liberal values that are supposed to be at the core of contemporary political anti-Zionism, or at least the modern values of inclusivity. So what we learned here about Israeli Independence Day, it began with, what school are you going to? And I answer, I go to Bais Ruchel. Rabbi Joel Teitelbaum, may his memory be a blessing, founded it. Question 2, with what goal did he found this school? With a goal of bringing back, of grabbing back Jewish children from the Zionist hands, and to teach us to be pious Jewish daughters, which means go modestly and to Mekayim on the mitzvahs, and to honor the mitzvahs, the commandments, bring an example of everyday life that we do in order to remain on the Torah way. And I say we go modestly. And then they go on to say, the goal needs to be to stay tied in every small way to the Holy Torah and not to make any changes in the smallest way. Tradition was at the core of the idea of the new, the modern, the Zionist, the innovative, the movement. That's bad. We stay with tradition. That was kind of the theology that we grew up with, even though there's a lot more complication to it, because inherent in this traditionalism is a response to modernity. It is a product of modernity. But we understood ourselves to be part of the old and Zionism to be part of the new. So we were asked, bring examples from history of times, of olden times, that there were other examples where they tried to take Jews away from the holy path, like is the case with Zionism. And I said, reformers, Tzaddikim, Maskilim, Zionists. Who are the people in our generation that are taking the Jews off of the right path? And I answer Zionism. In all the times that these people did all sorts of tricks to get Jews in their net, to get them off the pious ways and to get them not to be pious. What was the first step that Zionists took to get people off their pure faith? And I said, to tell Jews that they can come to Israel and that's where they will be able to serve God better. Meaning the Zionists tricked pious Jews into saying, go to Israel, you'll be able to be a better Jew there. And that was a trick for them to get people away from the pious way. And there was a lot of legitimacy, by the way, to this argument, because early Zionism was a secular movement. Now there's a tremendous religious Zionist philosophy, and there are many different religious Zionist views, but early Zionist was a secular movement. It was an egalitarian, almost utopian socialist movement, and it viewed it had these ideas, for instance, like kibbutzim, which were going to be communes, which still exist, of course, but were part of that utopian vision that involved the shedding of fanatical old. And we were raised to reject that. You know, while I was raised with these views of Zionists as the terrible threat, they were the ones who took the Holocaust survivors, the young children, up to the kibbutzim in Israel and robbed them of their heritage. They were the bad guys in the story. They were the ones who angered God. Amid all of this, we also said repeatedly, L'shinu abu b'Yerushalayim, may we already be returned to Jerusalem. We longed for Israel. Everywhere, dispersed in our everyday life, was the language of Israel as our homeland, Israel as our place that we long for to be finally the end of this exilic long history where whatever we suffer is finally going to come to an end. For me to be in Israel, there are no words needed. There is no explanation needed. It's a very gorgeous experience. It makes me cry. It makes me feel like a profound witness to something very beautiful. If I feel at home, I feel like that home goes back in a very, very deep way. It roots me to my ancestors, to my legacy that I inherited through the Holocaust narratives. It feels so different from the Israel that is being spoken of here in Brooklyn. If I step out my door right here, a couple of feet from here, on the wall there are stickers that say Zionism is terrorism. That feels miles away from my experience in Israel on Sukkot last year. But what happened after October 7, immediately, as we were still getting news of what was happening, I started to see people that I know personally say, well, this is the resistance against these horrible, evil oppressors that are the Israelis, who have locked the Gazans in an open-air prison, who are these brutal monsters and who have brought it on themselves. I have to say, it has been personally shocking to see that people would even, like, there's such a dissonance between different languages. But I felt like it was my place to step back and not to get involved in that, and not to say how I feel, especially because what followed was, of course, war, and war is terrible. War breaks my heart. I feel so bad about every loss of life, every innocent loss of life. I don't feel comfortable talking about war, even though, I was raised by people who did not fight back, who said God will protect us, and the consequences were enormous. I feel like we inherited so much trauma, and the approach of the people that survived this terrible event was a kind of theology that doesn't make sense to me, that kind of like God sends and we receive never made sense to me, especially not the part of self-blame. This must be, if these terrible things happen, the way to handle it is to ask ourselves, what did we do wrong? It never resonated with me, and yet I was very exposed to it. And I felt myself rejecting it always. I felt myself rejecting this. No. Terrible things happen to you, other people do it, then it's on them, and maybe you should respond in that way. I actually suffered a terrible loss when I was 19. I was very young. I was too young to really process it, and I was very fragile. And people at the time were saying to me, people are gossiping that maybe it happened to you because you were always a naughty kid or something like that. And even in my most vulnerable state, it was never, ever a matter for me of thinking that I had earned it, because it was an accident, and it had nothing to do with my actions. And I rejected this chain of events of saying an accident happens, we then find a way to blame people for it. And so the idea that the Jews dealt with the tragedy of the Holocaust by saying, well, now it's our fault and we're going to get more pious, that I reject. And the self-determination, the question of self-determination, of fighting back, of fighting for the survival of the Jewish people, that I feel is valid. It's valid for Israel to fight for its survival. I don't know what that entails, and whatever that entails is very painful, and I don't feel comfortable talking about it. I don't feel like it's my place to talk about it, and I don't want to talk about it, because I grieve for all the losses that happen in this process. The world gets very ugly sometimes, and the idea that the answer can be some kind of that there is some kind of absence of pain as the solution seems to me as very naive. And so I don't feel like it's my place to talk about what's going on in the war in Israel. But I will say that what I have experienced since October 7 has been an unleashing of language around Jews that is scary, that I see in my comments. I have gotten comments since October 7 that feel like they come off the scripts of our childhood plays. In our childhood, we had all these melodramatic plays about the bad guys, which were the anti-Semites, and the victims, the Jews. And the bad guys would say, filthy Juden, schmutzige Juden, and the Jews would cower. And that was, for me, tropes, for instance, that existed in our melodramatic school plays in Kirishol, safely tucked away in this innocent village, where it was like a trope like Disney would be to an American child. It was fantastical, it was beyond, it was so far away from reality. And then since October 7, I'll open my comments and literally addressed to me, a video was just me, I will be called filthy Juden, filthy Jews. And it's hard for me to even wrap my head around. Who says that? Is this real? Do people really think that by the very definition that people are Jews, they are a plague on society? That people really write off all the Jews as the source of all suffering? Like, that is really what is going on in my comments container. I can show you so many comments that I get saying that Hitler was right, the Austrian painter was right, he needs to finish his job. And I am shocked. And I find that I tell people, and I have one of two reactions. Either people say, well, rightfully so, which are the anti-Semites, and I don't know. Or people will say, yeah, that's anti-Semitism. That's what the world is like. In which case, I'm again shocked. Is this normal? Am I not finding out anything revolutionary? I guess not. I guess not. And yet at the same time, I have the impulse to document, to save all these comments, to put them in an archive, to show them to the world, and to say, let me ring the alarm. This is what's happening. Look at what's going on in the world. It's scary. Let's all do something. There's a terrible tragedy afoot. And then I realized that actually no one is surprised. Everyone knows. And people are like, yeah, that's what it's like. The irony is that so many of my videos are anti-Zionist Jews. And people will literally comment saying Jews, parentheses, Zionists, are a plague on the world. In other words, the word Zionist has become a modifier that makes it permissible for people to say what they think about Jews. And the hoi polloi, who are supposedly the most interested in justice, are participating in this permission granting of talking about Jews in this particular way. I have no doubt in my mind that Zionism has become the permission word to express anti-Semitism that I never imagined is rampant, but I see is rampant based on the flood of comments I get every morning, seeing so many comments blaming all the world's ills on Jews while encasing it in the language of Zionism. Of course you're hated. You are Jews. Jews are genociders. Comment on anti-Zionist, pacifistic Jews in New York City whose school curriculum involves erasing Israel. For those Jews, people will say, you are all the sources of the world's evil. Is this ignorance? Are you going to tell me that this ignorance is innocent? How can this ignorance be innocent when suddenly you know so much about what Jews who are supposedly committing these wrongs are doing wrong, while you can't bother at all to find out anything that you might see right about Jews? This is not an accident. This is permission granting on the opportunity to express an incredible scapegoating towards Jews. It is so scary to me. It is so scary. My grandmother, who went through the Holocaust, is still alive, and people are already comfortably expressing, calling me a filthy Jew. How is that even possible? It's not that I am upset, as I am shocked. I am shocked that this is happening and this is normalized. I would say maybe I made a mistake by talking here about how I feel about Israel, about my love for Israel. I especially would like to have a channel where anti-Zionist Hasidic Jews feel comfortable to express their views. I'm not here to judge them. I also know of a lot of Zionist Hasidic Jews, and I would like to be able to hear and be a non-judgmental ear for everyone. It's impossible for me, though, to be honest and not to say how I feel about Israel. But the pertinent point that all Jews, Zionist and non-Zionist, have now become openly targets since October 7, which, mind you, was a pogrom committed against innocent leftist Jews. I think that's really what I feel like I'm witnessing, I'm concerned by. I feel like I need to do something, I need to say something, I need to preserve something, I need to go up to the rooftop and say, let's be careful, let's not get carried away making the same mistake again of telling stories about a group of people who are the source of evil. It's for me as a Jewish YouTuber, that's been the tragedy of the year, has been to feel like we're in really scary times, and it's becoming more and more difficult to speak up to certain societal ills that I see. The side that I see is the side that is scapegoating all Jews, that is looking at a man with side locks and a beard, or a woman in a wig, and saying, this is the person that is evil, bringing evil, baby killers, committing all of these horrible things. That's the side that I see, and that's the side that I really feel like I want to talk to. And I feel like I'm in a place where the world doesn't want to hear, where you have to equivocate, you have to speak to other things that I can't talk to, other evils, other atrocities that I can't talk to. And so I end up feeling like I have to be silent, and that makes me feel responsible. Like I'm not doing my share to say what I see on the back end. And so here's me saying it as I see, and offering up a prayer. I really just, my hope and my prayer is for peace and a year where we find better news and better peace. And may it be so. The memory of all the lost ones be to a blessing.